Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest.
Fred Armisen.
Fritz Paul.
Javier Munoz.
Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast. Ow!
Hey, Talkhouse listeners, it's Josh Modell of the Talkhouse Podcast, and perhaps just as importantly for today's purposes, the Talkhouse Podcast Network, which has grown by leaps and bounds in 2025. Instead of a regular episode this week, we asked a bunch of the hosts in our network to answer 2 questions for you. Tell us about a favorite episode of their own show from this year, and then tell us about something they loved in 2025. I'm going to answer those questions myself and then turn it over to our friends from That's How I Remember It, Sing for Science, Life of the Record, and many more. Now, for the Talkhouse Podcast itself, we had a ton of lively and interesting conversations this year, from Andy Samberg and Seth MacFarlane to Ada Leah and Shirley Manson dropping in. I can't pick a favorite, but if you missed it, I'd recommend going back to the chat between Matt Berninger of The National and Alan Sparhawk from Low that ran back in May. Those guys are 2 of my favorite songwriters ever, and they got into the deepness and darkness pretty quickly. Speaking of Sparhawk, his second album in about 12 months was one of my favorite things of 2025. Made with his friends and neighbors in the bluegrass-adjacent band Trampled by Turtles, it's a loose but intense set of songs that feels like an exhale after his previous record, White Roses My God, which is also great. I got a chance to see Sparhawk and Trampled by Turtles play these songs together this year in St. Paul, and it was something really special. So now, here are some thoughts from other hosts in the Talkhouse Podcast Network. Check out all their shows if you haven't already, and we'll see you with another great batch of podcasts in 2026. Have a great holiday season.
Hey, it's Craig Finn from the podcast That's How I Remember It. We're wrapping up 2025, and I wanted to bring up a few highlight moments of the year. I'm recording this Thanksgiving weekend, and I'm very thankful for the year we had. I loved all the That's How I Remember It episodes, of course, but a special thrill this year was having Jeff and Stephen McDonald from the band Red Cross on the show. I've always loved Red Cross since I was in high school, but I've also really loved their interviews as well. So it was super fun to sit in the interviewer chair with both of the brothers sitting next to each other on their laptop, listen to their encyclopedic pop culture minds talk about all kinds of great stuff. Jeff seeing the Beatles at age 2, when they were trading VHS tapes with Quentin Tarantino, so much more. It's such a blast, and I highly recommend checking out the Red Cross documentary from last year. It's called Born Innocent, The Red Cross Story, and it's just amazing. I've also been trying to wrap my head around all the great stuff I saw this year, listened to, read, etc. I had a great year that way, and it ended with going on tour with Patterson Hood. His album, Exploding Trees and Airplane Screams, that came out earlier this year, has been deep inside of my brain and absolutely one of my favorites of 2025. It's a cool, deep record that's a little different for him. And that was super apparent when I saw him play with his band, the Sense Surrounders, in March in NYC, which was really an exciting show. Patterson was my first guest on this podcast, and he's a friend, and I love seeing him push into new territory. There are a ton of other great records I heard this year, excellent shows, cool films. I was consistently excited in 2025. I hope you were too. So thanks for all of it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for a great year. We'll see you in 2026. I'm Craig Finn, and that's how I remember it.
Hey, this is Jason from Aquarium, Drunkard Transmissions. We had 2 amazing seasons in 2025 and All One Song, our mini-series hosted by Tyler Wilcox, where all these different guests stopped by to focus on a single Neil Young composition. So it's really tough to pick a favorite episode from this year. But if pressed, I've got to shout out our episode with Jeff Bridges. It was absolutely incredible to have Jeff on to talk about his own musical history and creative outlook and get far out and spacey with us. And I really just had an incredible time talking with a hero. There is nothing like hearing Jeff Bridges' voice in your headphones while you're talking to him. And in terms of other 2025 things that I really dug, I want to shout out the movie Eddington. I don't feel like I saw enough people talking about how brilliant Eddington was. It was absolutely demented and upsetting and hilarious and really an inspiring piece of art that I think pushed a lot of boundaries and probed some really uncomfortable territory, which is what great art can do. So Ari Aster, we salute you at the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast for Eddington. And big love to all of our Talkhouse friends.
This is Dan Nordheim, host of Life of the Record, and I really loved working on all the episodes this year, but one standout moment for me was talking to Bill Callahan about the Smog record, A River Ain't Too Much to Love. I really appreciated Bill going kind of deep into his process and this particular moment in his career when it was a big turning point for him. And 2025 was a great year for music. I had a lot of records I loved, but one that I keep going back to is by this artist named Emily Hines, who is based in Nashville, and she put out a really great record called These Days. Check it out.
Hi, this is Matt Whyte, host of Sing for Science, a podcast that brings musicians and scientists together in conversation. Looking back at 2025, I think that the standout experience for me working on the show far and away was surrounding an incident that happened in Nashville. We went down there to tape an episode on psilocybin. We weren't on psilocybin. We were taping an episode about psilocybin with Casey Musgraves and Paul Stamets at the Ryman. So we're in this theater. It's the biggest event that I'd ever done with the show. And Paul was talking about his early experiences hallucinating on mushrooms. And he said that those experiences were significantly informed by his upbringing as a Christian. His mother was evangelical Christian. And so many of his visuals and a lot of the information that came through was centered around Christ. And he was very devoted to Jesus Christ. And so as a result, many of his trips were about Jesus. And then he said that after some time, he came to realize that religious figures like Jesus Christ were portals into this consciousness that we all share. And it was at this point that this guy in the audience stood up and just shouted, "This is bullshit. You have no right to talk about Jesus Christ that way. Casey Musgraves, you're a witch." And it was truly shocking. And it was about a week after the Charlie Kirk assassination. And there I was, a New Yorker in the South, and it was deeply disturbing. And if you look at the footage, both Paul and I are smiling, I think probably because we're uncomfortable. But Casey, who was right at home there, she is just totally stone-faced. And she looks out at the audience and she said, "Sir, I don't think that's very fucking Christian of you." And then the audience erupts in support, and the rest of the taping went well. I think that it's a tremendous episode. And then as to other media that I might recommend, not unrelated, following that event, I was thinking a lot about her comment, not just the courage that it took for her to stand up and deliver it like the pro that she is, but I guess it's about around that time an op-ed came out in the New York Times called "Today's Christian Right is More About Vengeance Than Kindness." And, that resonated quite a bit with what she said. And I read that, and the algorithm got hip to what I was interested in. So next thing I knew, I saw this author plugging his book on Seth Meyers. And that book is called "Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds." The guy's part comedian, part journalist, but it's a really good book, and it answers a lot of the questions that I have about evangelical Christian hypocrisy, or at least politicians who seemingly speak out of both sides of their mouth. So this was all kind of rooted in this experience I had in Nashville. And some other great episodes we did last year were Nico Case on ecological horticulture. We did one with Rafi on the science of awe and gratitude and empathy. So if you haven't checked out the show, please do so, and have a very happy holiday.
Hey, this is Dylan Tupper Rupert, and I'm the host of Music Person, which launched on the Talkhouse Network on June 18th. So happy 6 months of existence to Music Person. In the last 6 months, like every moment has been the favorite. I mean, the sample size is small and the quality's high, so the ratio is, disproportionately full of amazing moments. But I really loved getting to do scene reports this year. In addition to me sitting down with artists and musicians and just music scene people that are really interesting and impactful, I also hit the road and went to some festivals. I soft launched the show with a South by Southwest scene report, like diary. And then I went to Hopscotch and Raleigh in the fall. And it was just this really fun way to get to have a presence at a music festival that was a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit social shenanigans, a little bit gossipy, and just a lot of fun. I saw so much amazing music this year that it actually reinvigorated me as someone who maybe should have already aged out of going to music festivals into someone who thinks music festivals are wonderful again. But besides that, across the 20-odd interviews that I did this year, I feel like a common theme from speaking with Carly Hartzman of Wednesday and Ryan Davis of Ryan Davis and the Roadhouse Band, and Maddie Diaz and Francie Medosh from Flory, a through line of a lot of people talking about music and the lives that they live from being musicians, was this really interesting attunement, I think, to sense of place and where people come from and how it affects their writing and their art. And that's something that I'm really excited to explore through travel and further conversations in 2026. Okay, thing that I love. Not to be super morose or heavy, but it is what it is. Something that I loved in 2025 that I would recommend, maybe not to everyone, but for those with the particular itch or psychosis to do such a thing, is to throw a party, throw a festival named after yourself, like I did, Dylan Fest 2025. Put on a show, have your friends play. I did that this year a couple times, and they were some of the best weekends of my life. I ended up making a scene report episode of the podcast about my Dylan Fest 2025. And kind of as a joke, just literally off the cuff, I did a cold open for that episode where I just start talking about how I think about death all the time. And that's why I want to be around my friends as much as possible, even though there are so many of them and they're all across the country. And this was my excuse or my vehicle for getting a lot of these people together. And besides all of the other things I was feeling, it made me so happy that I made space in my life for that moment and getting all my friends together. So throw parties and also go to them.